everyone, and welcome to the Sania Farooqui Show. Today, we're going to be talking about human rights situation in China. Very recently, 50 countries expressed concerns over the human rights situation in China's Xinjiang region and urged Beijing to act on the recommendations of a United Nations report alleging these human rights violations against Uyghurs. The statement read out by Canada during a debate of the UN General Assembly's Human Rights Committee, which was signed mostly by Western countries, read, "We are gravely concerned about the human rights situation in the People's Republic of China, especially the ongoing human rights violation of Uyghurs and other predominantly Muslim minority in Xinjiang. The criticism is largely symbolic after an earlier attempt to force a debate on the issue was voted down at the UN Human Rights Council." To discuss this and to get a better sense of what is really happening and to discuss the persecution of Uyghurs in Xinjiang, joining us today, we have Zubayra Shamseden. Zubayra is the Chinese Outreach Coordinator at the Uyghur Human Rights Project, also known as UHRP, a documentation and an advocacy group based in Washington, D.C. She has been campaigning for human rights and political freedom of Uyghur people since the late 1980s. She was elected as Vice President of the World Uyghur Congress for 2021-2024 term and previously chaired its Human Rights Committee. Zubayra has worked in multicultural education and community liaison for nonprofit, academic, and government organizations in Australia and the US for over 2 decades. Zubayra, it is truly wonderful to have you join us today on the Sania Farooqui Show. Pleasure to have you on.
Very nice to be here. Yeah, thank you.
All right. I want to begin by discussing the significance of these 50 countries who've expressed concerns over the human rights situation in China's Xinjiang region, and also tell us a little about this situation. When we speak about human rights violation, what is really going on the ground over there?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. This is a great question. The 50 countries concerned about what's happening to Uyghur people in East Turkestan. Pardon me, I prefer to call my homeland East Turkestan.
Please feel free.
Yeah. Brief background information later. It is really significant. Yeah, although, as you said, it is the mostly Western countries. But the thing is, what are we talking about here? It's just not just the Uyghur human rights violation or Uyghur crisis or Uyghur genocide. What we've been doing is, in reality, we protecting the democratic world order, the freedom for all human beings, not just the simply Uyghurs. Because the matter that happening to Uyghur people, it's not something simple. It's not just kind of Uyghur issue, Uyghur crisis, Uyghur genocide, or something else, or the context far more beyond that we can express. I mean, by saying that, I can tell you what's happening to Uyghur people right now in East Turkestan, which is, again, I prefer to call my homeland East Turkestan, but yes, officially it's called by Chinese government as the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. But you may kind of feel stranded in the autonomous region. But does Uyghurs have autonomy? But if it is, if the Uyghurs has autonomy, would that kind of, abuse, crisis, now we're talking about genocide, is going to be happen. So given that, so I can tell you a bit of background information. The Uyghur region, or China's so-called Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, it was an independent country before, called East Turkestan Republic, and in East Turkestan. In history, the Uyghurs established their own independent country, one in 1933, one in 1944. Let's just, come back a bit of, the recent history. So East Turkestan, or Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, occupied by Chinese Communist government in 1949. It was invaded. But that invasion was because of the Russian communists' help. The invasion was so-called peaceful, but in reality, it's not. The Chinese government deceived Uyghurs, and they said that they're going to offer autonomy, that's what happened in 1955. The region, or the former East Turkestan Republic, changed to Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And Chinese government promised just a fantastic autonomous rule or autonomous governance to Uyghurs on paper at a time. So that autonomy was very appealing to Uyghurs, of course. I mean, the China is our neighbor. The other side is a Russian communist country, our neighbor, but we're just the in-between. And definitely, our lands controlled by China is not something just a miracle to China because of, the international conflict. And, that just China just lucky to take over our country because of that all resolutions. So the Chinese government never implemented the real autonomy for Uyghurs. They have ruled the region with deception and repression since 1949. And that's why right now you're asking a question of that human rights violations. It's what's happening in the region is beyond the human rights violations. The China intensified its crackdown. It's step by step, one by one, year by year, since 1945 up until now, especially since 2016, Chinese government completely changed its repression to different form or different method, different tactics. We've been telling the world since 50s, there are many people fled. You can read the history. And my family is live witness to all the history that the East Turkestan, the Uyghurs had been through. People fled in the 50s. We've been struggling. We've been trying to telling the world, saying that, look, Chinese government is deceiving. It's not implementing the real autonomy to Uyghur people. So you have to say something about it. But the world was mute. We talked about violations, abuse against the Uyghurs, killing of Uyghurs, torturing of Uyghurs, even, implementing the policy exactly opposite of what Chinese government wrote in the constitution as well. Not just, in the autonomous rule, the Uyghurs should be governing themselves in the region. The Uyghurs should be able to use their own language, should be able to practice their own religion, should be able to live in the way, the traditional way of life, should be able to keep everything historically. They should not be changed anything. They should not be changed the names of the people to Chinese way. They should not be changed street names, or they have to demolish everything, every historical heritage of Uyghurs, and rebuild Chinese style buildings, Chinese style cities. Just a completely, you have to become Chinese. There was no such a condition. There was no such a constitutional rule or laws or regulations that were written in the constitution. But the constitution is something nice, but in reality, that was what's happening to Uyghurs.
Yeah. So
the abuse was non-stop. Like, for example, I can tell you just one example. The massacre that happened in my hometown, and you can just Google my name and find that article that I have wrote about it on Diplomat and other news outlets, the publications as well. In 1997, in my hometown, Gulja, there are young people protested on the street, just simply demanding freedom to express, freedom to practice the religion. That protest met with killing. The Chinese security force opened fire towards the peaceful protest that has nothing on their head. All of them are young people. They painted the Gulji streets with blood. And after, again, they have arrested hundreds of Uyghur young people, just simply because they are suspicious those young people has connection with that protest. And then that incident turned that city into different thing. It turned into prison for the people. And that kind of incidents happened many times. And the Chinese government, with that excuse, again, began mass arrests, detention, imprisonment, and definitely at the same time implementing so-called, the one-child policy. But that one-child policy against Uyghur women is much more harsher than the mainland China. there are the evidence documentation of aborting the women who are 7 months old pregnant. 7 months pregnant, it's almost that baby can be born, can live. The policy is very harsh, and a huge fine, and the demolishing people's house just simply because they had extra one child or extra two children, that kind of condition. And also, there is no word, and as I just briefly mentioned you before, we have just no rights. There is no such a thing as rights in the region before, in East Turkestan.
Yeah.
So again, there are documentations about it. We've been telling it. Personally, I was telling it since late 80s to the world, but the world was mute. Didn't take all these things seriously. And what has happened as a result of silence of the world, Chinese government interpreted it as a kind of green light, so they can do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
Since China became very powerful economically, and as you know right now, and now China interprets the world silence and everything else just like, they can do whatever they want because they have money.
Yeah.
They have resources, they have everything, whatever they can do. That's not something just a simple thing. And it's not that the China's ambition is not something just to, do the rights violation against the Uyghurs or genocide against the Uyghurs so they can stop that. That's not that simple. So whatever the Chinese government has done to Uyghurs, began from the 50s, and they did everywhere. They did to Tibetans, they did to Southern Mongolians, they did that to even the own civilians. Like imagine probably, about 84, the Tiananmen massacre, how the Chinese authority, killed the students who just peacefully protesting.
Yeah.
And now look at Hong Kong, what's happening to Hong Kong. Even Taiwan, you may have heard, when Speaker Pelosi visited Taiwan after she came back, that the China's warning word against what, the US officials visit to Taiwan is, look, the Taiwan needs re-education too. That so-called re-education was the beginning of China's building concentration camps for the Uyghurs. Yeah. So that means the Chinese government can build a concentration camp at anyone against the Chinese authority, China's dictatorship, or against the Chinese view of the world order.
Talking about one of the reports published by UHRP, I read an estimate that Chinese authorities have arbitrarily detained at least upward of 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camp, prisons, and other detention facilities in East Turkestan, Xinjiang region since 2017, as you pointed out. This data was analyzed by Uyghur diaspora members to document a minimum of 312 Uyghur, Kazakh, and Kyrgyz intellectual and cultural elites whom you've suspected have been detained or imprisoned as of late 2021. Tell us a little about this report and also about the camps where they're being detained, because we have been getting harrowing reports of what kind of camps are being built and the treatment and the human rights violation that are taking place in these camps. Since you've worked on these reports, give us a little insight on that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. In terms of statistics, like detention of about 1 million Uyghurs into concentration camps, that is not just the analysis of the Uyghur diaspora. It is the true statistics that analyzed by the scholars, by other like Australian Strategic Institute and other even UN has said that's the statistical information about the detention of the Uyghurs. But the estimate that it's not just the 1 million, it is estimated that it's 1.8 to 3 million people detained in the concentration camps. That's the estimate. Okay. But that's the true number. It's not just something that reported by the Uyghur diaspora. Mm-hmm. In terms of the intellectuals, the Uyghur intellectuals and other Turkic intellectuals detention by the Chinese government, again, that intensified since that the Chinese government built the concentration camps. But probably, when the first time we report about the Chinese detaining people arbitrarily in the concentration camps and abusing those people. And at the time, Chinese government said that, they completely denied, said that, look, those facilities is re-education places and re-education camps. We are not detaining people, we are educating people, we're giving them skills so they can get better jobs and they can, improve their lives. It's the alleviation of poverty. That was the explanation of Chinese government. But soon after, as the report said, you just indicated already, and then we documented, not only just we documented, and other research organizations, research academics also documented. Like some academics, who traveled to East Turkestan and worked with the Uyghur intellectuals documented, like, for example, the most specific one is Darren Byler. Probably you have heard about him. The Elise Anderson, and there are a few scholars. Yeah. They report that, they lost contact with the intellectuals they have worked with before. That was just a purely academic, scholarly work that they are doing. It's nothing to do with the politics. And with that, we start to research about it. And later, even, the personal testimonies came up. For example, testimony about Dr. Rahila Dawood, and her daughter testified, saying that my mom disappeared.
Yeah.
Ilham Tohti, the Jawhar Ilham, his daughter testified. I mean, he was arrested and sentenced for life. That's clear, everybody knows about it. And then Tashful Latif, the principal, the dean of the Xinjiang University, and his brother testified, saying that the brother arrested and sentenced to death, with a 2-year delay.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Halmurat Gopur, the principal, another dean of the Xinjiang Medical Institute. I mean, there are countless, as we document, it's hundreds. And then we questioned Chinese government's detention of Uyghurs, said that, look, you said those facilities is nothing to do with concentration camp. Well, it's not. But it's re-education camps. Why would those professors, deans, doctors, students, even some intellectuals who educate overseas, they are fluent in few languages, not only just the Chinese, and they have much higher educational degree than anyone else. Maybe those people who are managing the detention, maybe far more better educated than Xi Jinping. So why would they be detained?
Yeah.
That was the question. I mean, we see that this is completely just the eliticide. It's it is a cultural genocide against the Uyghurs, so they can just get rid of top of the society, the elites of the society, so the rest of the people can be easily controlled. I mean, that's the purpose of Chinese government, that what we see, based on those reports. And that's how it's been documented. It's not just something that we get the information from the diaspora or something. It is scholarly, and scholars also documented, witnessed that what has happened to those people. I do recommend you to read an article about Parhab Dursun that published in New York Times and in many other universities' publications. That person also sentenced to 16 years jail. He's just a simple academic, scholar, writer. And Abdulqadir Jalaluddin is the same thing. And that person also, been to other countries. And, Yalqin Rozi, he came to United States and he went back because he wanted to contribute in his, nation's development, the intellectual or academic life. And that's why they did not choose to live in the free world even. Because you can see they are just a pure academics. Why would Chinese government want to detain such a people? They could contribute to even Chinese society as well. It's not just the Uyghurs. It's those kind of people that treasure to the world society,
And we've also seen reports of how independent Uyghur-run websites are ceasing to exist. So there's a lot of digital censorship as well, because digital is how you also reach out to the world and you tell your story. Reports of how these websites have disappeared, and those who run the websites have also been, disappeared into China's detention camp center. Little about that.
That's another way of how Chinese government control Uyghurs, the freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And that is the most deadly way, I guess, because this is a technological world. In this world, I mean, many people cannot imagine, even they think that it's a lie that you're saying that we are unable to talk to our relatives, we are unable to communicate with our relatives back home. But for Uyghurs, it's reality. Like right now, I have phone on my hand, right? But I am unable to ring my relatives back home in East Turkestan. Because,
why is that?
Because the Chinese government, if I ring, the number one, I afraid that my relative is going to send to concentration camps, because that's the reason. When Chinese government arrested people and sent to concentration camps, there are many, many reasons. The particular listed in the publications were 26, like one of them is, if anyone talked to relatives in overseas on the phone, or if anyone cried loudly to express, sadness for something, and you're not allowed to do that. And if some person suddenly just gave up smoking or drinking and became non-smoker, non-drinker, and then you became extremist, and so you're going to send to concentration camps. And also another reason is just as simply you have traveled to, some 20-something designated countries in your, once in your life. That includes definitely Turkey, United States, Saudi Arabia. As you know, the many Uyghurs and Muslims, they go to Saudi for Hajj, and just the tourism. And even one occasion, I remember, the people were questioned, Uyghurs, where do you prefer to go to tourism, sightseeing? Definitely many Uyghurs prefer to go somewhere that they think is something interesting. Like Turkey is the most appealing visited place, because the Turkic culture is quite similar to ours, and definitely Western countries and other Middle East, and those countries that the culturally, religiously, or in other ways something appealing to us. But when the Uyghurs say that, the Chinese government would get suspicious, saying that why wouldn't you choose to visit mainland China, all these Chinese cities for tourism? Because it's not a place that we prefer to visit. That kind of thinking, It's very simple choices also makes Uyghurs as an extremist or as an suspicious person, so you are liable to send to concentration camps. So that kind of reason. So many people unable to express themselves freely, talk freely. Like even when I used to talk, I did not talk to my relatives since 2015. Even before that, when I talked to my relatives, we never ever was able to talk freely. Like I can't ask questions like, so, what's happening over there? So are you okay? Are you good? Did something happen? No. This is all very simple. I'm very good. We're fine. We're eating, we're playing, we're seeing, we're doing something. For them is the same thing. We are good. We are fantastic, living good lives. But in reality, it's not. That's how it is. I mean, in terms of internet, that was the first thing that the Chinese government controlled in East Turkestan. Like, especially one example that I can tell you, in 2009, July 5 massacre happened in Urumqi. Soon after the massacre, the Chinese government completely cut off internet and the telephones for over 9 months.
Yeah.
We have documents about it. You can look at the UHRP report section on the website. There are detailed reports about how Chinese government completely locked down the region, just isolate the region during that time. And this is very constant. And later, later they allowed people to use telephones, internet, everything, but everything is censored. The high-tech control of Uyghurs is far more beyond your imagination, because every step, every breath of Uyghur life was controlled. by using high-tech technology. Like, for example, the Chinese government distributed telephones to Uyghurs even. So there are apps in the, they can track where they go, what they do, everything. According to some news, even they have installed the kind of surveillance cameras into TVs, television, just everything, every electronic equipment that you could have in the household. The internet is definitely. And also right now, many people, even some overseas Uyghurs, are able to talk to their relatives. The only way that they can communicate is through WeChat. Yeah. As you know, the WeChat is the Chinese security app. It directly connects to Chinese Security Bureau. Mm. So that means whatever you're talking, whatever you're doing is censored, it's been listened. Yes. So there is no freedom. You are just 100% watched by the Chinese authority. The internet is very simple. They just block it. Yeah. Like right now, we are unable to email. I mean, you don't hear any Uyghur or any other Turkic people that who are able to, email or internet, the independent internet websites. There is no such a websites anymore. Like, for example, the Uyghur scholar Ilham Tohti, what he did is simply just establish an Uyghur Biz website to educate Chinese people about what's happening to Uyghurs in Chinese language. Just as simply what he did and what he tried to tell and establish, just a very peaceful manner, and try to establish communication between Chinese and telling Chinese government to do the right thing. It'll implement the real autonomy, the autonomous rule that you have offered to people, just to implement, just make very simple things. But for that, the person who never advocates splitism or separatism, accused as a separatist, terrorist, and sentenced for life. Yeah. Again, it's just to do with the website. Another, author, she's still in jail right now. I mean, the people and everyone, I mean, especially, the organizations like us, even US Religious Freedom, that organization, even US government, many Western governments advocating. Gulmira Iman, she's the same thing, that just simply she expressed her idea on the website. Yeah. She's a writer, and she's in jail right now, just simply because of using the internet. Yeah. And many such sites all just eliminated. You don't find the Uyghur business online right now. You don't find any Uyghur forums or any Uyghur website platforms that they can freely express themselves. You don't find any anyway, other than just the official Chinese government maintained, Chinese government controlled websites and news sites. Yeah. No independent, nothing from the Uyghurs. There are reports, even probably you've been reading it lately, about how all the Uyghur websites, Uyghur communication online just completely eliminated. Yeah. Since we are going to be running out of time, I'm going to ask you two questions. One is, do you think the 50 countries and many other international human rights organizations, UN bodies, or even strategic partner countries calling out human rights abuses in China, from China, will help the cause? Do you think the world needs to do more to prevent this genocide or these very blatant forms of human rights abuses that have been reported so far? Do you think enough is being done? What more should be done? No, it's not been enough. There should be done more and should act. I mean, it's the time, what's happening on the ground it's beyond the imagination. And a genocide is not something simple. And the genocide happening on 21st century in front of the world eyes, it's unacceptable. I think whether that supportive over 50 countries, the Western countries or any other, what's happening to Uyghurs, it's just a big question. It's a question to the humanity's conscience. They all should act. It's not just something simple. It's not just something simple that you're saving Uyghurs. In reality, you are saving the world. You are saving the true democratic, free world order that people put so many effort into establish for in many centuries. Because what China is threat is, it's not just a simple threat against Uyghurs, it's threat to the world. If not just that those 50 countries, the whole world saves Uyghurs, that means you are saving the world.
Yeah. All right.
I mean, that's why they had to act. It's statement not enough. The more action needed, and it is everybody's obligation and the conscience of human beings.
Yeah. And my last question for you is, Xi Jinping has, as many claimed, become China's most powerful leader since the founder of People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong. And just recently, Xi Jinping secured his third term. While this remains significant globally, but there are also many concerns from, human rights organizations about China's position when it comes to the impact of authoritarian rule on rights. Authorities have decimated Chinese civil society, imprisoned numerous government critics, severely restricted freedom of speech, and deployed mass surveillance technology, both within China and, as you mentioned, in East Turkestan as well, to monitor and control citizens. Keeping all this in mind, along with the fact that US, its biggest competitor, has said in 2021 that China's repression of Uyghurs is genocide. That's a big statement coming from United States. What are your thoughts on this, and how do you think this is going to play out? How is China's position going to change, or will it change globally, especially now that all eyes are on China and Xi Jinping's third term, and also on the fact that human rights violations are not anymore kept undercover, or, as you said, in the 80s, they used to be overlooked, but no longer anymore. Do you think that's going to change, or do you think, just to get a little bit on your thoughts on this?
It's not, we say that it should change, not going to, but it should be changed, and we should make it change. In here, we're talking about, you just mentioned that the US, the most, the competitor of China. But I think that competition, it doesn't relate to what Chinese government's violation against the Uyghurs or genocide against the Uyghurs and other Turkic people. The competition, economic competition, and the other competition is something different. But in terms of human crisis or genocide, death and life situation, that competition has nothing to do with it. To me, the US government's designation of genocide, it's not something because of they try to compete with China and tell China that it's using the Uyghur situation as Chinese government describes or tells the world, saying that whatever happening to Uyghurs is it's just a Western conspiracy. Yeah. Or, they trying to use Uyghur card to, stand against China, and they are jealous about China's rise. The problem in here, it's nothing to do with China's rise. Everybody, even Uyghurs are very happy that China is to get rich and rise. It's their problem. Okay, it's not problem, it's good for them. Okay, let them do it. But the thing is, no matter how powerful the Chinese government become or China becomes, no matter how rich they are, the money they have, the problem in here is inhuman and should be make China to pay. And whether US, UN, or any other governments or concerned organizations, they should make China to accountable for the atrocity it causing against the Uyghurs and other people. If we don't make China to pay for it, and that the Chinese government would do more, and because it's already there, it's happening. So again, I wish to just repeat, the Uyghur genocide, the Uyghur crisis, it's not just a simple Uyghur crisis, and it's not just a Uyghur matter, it's beyond that. It's beyond just a simple genocide against the A people, which China claims it's the minority group of China, but in fact, it's not. So to me, we will, and I'm sure because the make China to be responsible, the atrocity that it caused against those innocent people it's principles of democracy, it's principles of the free world. That's what all these free countries and democratic countries establishment basis for. So if violations, genocide happens in one part of the world, that means it's everybody is responsible of whole world, and it's responsible of everyone, every government, just anybody.
All right. On that note, thank you so much. It was truly a pleasure to have you on the Sania Farooqui Show, and thank you for your inputs, and wish you the very best of luck for the amazing work that you're doing. I couldn't imagine bringing in a better expert to speak today on this topic. So truly, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Sania.
Thank you. And for those of you who've tuned in, thank you so much for watching. I hope you will subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And do stay tuned, as we will be back with a new episode next week. Thank you so much for watching.